When I was 17 years old, I had this friend named Melissa. Now, Melissa and I were pretty close. We could rely on each other for advice, especially about intimate topics. Whenever we had classes together, we would always sit together, that sort of thing. We never really hung out outside of school, but she was the closest, and by closest, I mean the only female friend that I had all throughout high school, and honestly, throughout most of my childhood overall. In 11th grade, Melissa asked me to go to homecoming with her. Now, for context, at the time, she had a boyfriend. This boyfriend, for whatever reason, did not want to take her to homecoming. Still don't know why to this day. I guess he just didn't want to go to homecoming in general, and quite frankly, I don't really blame him. I'm not one for school dances either. But he didn't want to take her, and she had this feeling that she was going to be leaving the high school that we were at to move back to New York City after 11th grade. And apparently in New York City, at least according to her, they don't really do homecoming. So she felt like this would be her last chance to go to homecoming, and since her boyfriend didn't want to take her, she figured she should go with me. I told her, no, that is not a good idea at all, because you have a boyfriend. Why would we go to homecoming when you have a boyfriend? I'm not about to be the one who ruins this girl's relationship. But looking back on it, after all these years, I'm 25 now, so this was 8 years ago. Actually, maybe 9 years ago. Might have been 16. I think even if she had been single, I wouldn't have gone to homecoming with her. Now, for context, Melissa was a pretty dope girl. Honestly, she was a really dope person. And if I'm being brutally honest, I found her pretty attractive as well. I found her to be a pretty girl, and that is exactly why I didn't want to go to homecoming with her, was because I felt like if we went to homecoming, I would catch feelings. And so I set that boundary without even knowing what setting boundaries was. I set that boundary that we are not going to go to homecoming. You can go to homecoming with somebody else, but I'm not going to be there. And I ended up not going to homecoming at all. Didn't go to prom, didn't go to any of the school dances. And do I regret that decision all these years later? No, I don't. Melissa ended up getting married to that guy, funny enough. Don't know how they're doing now. I hope they're doing great. But a couple years later, I met this other girl who I will not name in this video. And to say that I was smitten would be an understatement of epic proportions. I was head over heels for this girl. It was instantaneous. Honestly, I wouldn't even say I was attracted to her per se. It was more of a gravitational pull. That's the best way I could explain it. Okay, right now I'm filming this video in this apartment, and you can see we're up on the 22nd floor. Okay, it's a very, very high up apartment unit. If I were to jump out of this window right now, there's pretty much nothing to prevent me from hitting the ground. Even if I had a parachute on, eventually I'm going to come down and hit the ground. In the same way, the connection and the infatuation that I had for this girl felt inevitable. That's the best way I could describe it. It felt inevitable, and it felt familiar. There was a sense of familiarity that even all these years later, with the benefit of hindsight and assessing things rationally and doing therapy and having countless discussions with my loved ones about the situation, I still don't have an explanation for what that was. Still don't. I've brought up the term twin flame a lot in the past, and maybe I'll make a whole separate video about that on this channel. I probably will. But suffice to say that I was deeply, deeply into this girl, and it didn't take me long to know that this was somebody that I wanted to build a future with. Didn't take me long at all. Now, maybe I was being a bit overzealous, whatever. We go on a date. The date goes amazing. I'm talking about it went even better than I could have expected. especially for a first date. I mean, we hung out for probably, what, 8 hours? 8 hours, 10 hours, something like that. We were out for a long time. Most of that time was actually spent in the car in front of her house because I brought her home after going to the movies and dinner. And she just didn't get out of the car. She literally sat in my car for another 4 or 5 hours because I guess she enjoyed my company as much as I enjoyed hers. And believe me when I tell you that I was not complaining about her being in my car. So after that date, I think maybe we talked on FaceTime one or two more times. And whenever we would talk on FaceTime, we'd be on the phone for 14, 16, 18 hours. That's no exaggeration. Mind you, I had only met this girl around 2 weeks prior to all of this happening. So imagine you just met somebody. You didn't even know they existed. 2 weeks later, you're spending 8 hours at a time with them in person and over 12 hours at a time with them on the phone. Okay, again, this was not a normal situation by any means. A few days before our second date, she ghosted me. And I mean, at the time, things were going so well that the thought of her ghosting me didn't even cross my mind. I thought something had happened to her. I thought she got in a car crash or she was in the hospital or something. So I was worried sick. She ghosted me for pretty much a whole entire day. And I hit her up. I think I might have double or triple texted her. And eventually she got back to me and she was like, hey, can we talk? And when she sent me that message, I already knew it was coming. So long story short, she basically friend-zoned me. She sent me this big-ass paragraph saying that she wasn't ready for a relationship and she just wanted to be friends. I didn't take it particularly well. I won't go into the specifics on that, but I was already depressed before that whole situation, and she kind of offered a very brief reprieve from my depression and my general lack of fondness for my life conditions overall. I didn't take that very well at all. I didn't really express that to her, but I'll just kind of leave it at that. I didn't take it very well. But eventually I collected myself and we still ended up hanging out on our quote unquote second date, but as friends. Now, this particular date was on Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day 2020. I remember this very, very vividly. We went and got sushi at probably 3 p.m. And she told me whenever we met up at the restaurant that she needed to leave at around 6 p.m. because I think she was having dinner with her family or something like that. I don't know. She said she needed to leave at 6 p.m. So I was like, okay, that's perfectly fine. So we eat our sushi. We went to the grocery store, got some snacks. She put me onto some vegan snacks. And we sat in my car for maybe another couple of hours. At about 5:55 p.m., I take her over to her car so that she can get in her car and go. She doesn't get out of my car. Okay, I'm sitting there for probably 2 minutes, just in the middle of the parking lot. Car is probably behind me having to go around and whatnot. She's not getting out. She doesn't even unbuckle her seatbelt. So I already know what type of time she's on because of the first date where she did the same thing, where we were sitting in my car for 5+ hours. I already talked about all of this in my book, Soul Shock. But I'm just briefly recounting this because you'll see why later on in the video. So she didn't end up getting out of my car until around 1 a.m. Okay, so now we just hung out for around 10 hours, if my math serves me correctly, 10 hours as friends on Valentine's Day. Now, I don't know about you, but me personally, just that alone is already a bit strange. That's just me personally. I don't know, maybe there's something wrong with me, I'm not sure. But the next time we hung out would have been around a week later. And I noticed that in addition to her doing the same exact thing with the not getting out of my car and basically spending another 8 to 10 hours with me, I noticed that she was saying and doing things that were uncharacteristic of my idea of friendship. And I'm talking about, let's say, for example, touching me or just being physically close to me, a lot closer than was necessary for any given situation. Not that I particularly minded at that time, but that was something I noticed she was doing. And just saying stuff like, oh, it's been exactly a month since we matched on Tinder. Things like that. That's not really the type of stuff that you say to a friend, at least as far as I'm concerned, based on my definition of friendship. And notice how I said my idea of friendship. And this is a very big distinction because when I was younger, I didn't really understand the difference between my idea of friendship and friendship overall. The idea of friendship. I thought that my idea of friendship was the consensus idea of friendship. So maybe to you, all of these things sound perfectly normal. Evidently, to her, they did. Because after the fourth time we hung out, where things went very, very similarly, I kind of started pressing the line a little bit. And I started showing more of my romantic interest because throughout this whole time, even though I had mentally convinced myself that I could just be friends with her, after that Valentine's Day hangout session, date, whatever the fuck you want to call it, I kind of realized that that was not sustainable. It wasn't sustainable for me to be friends with this girl because I was just too into her. Okay, I'm not just talking about the physical attraction. I'm talking about, again, that gravity, the same force that if I jumped out of that window that I showed you earlier, this 22nd story apartment, would cause me to hit the ground. And there's nothing I could do about it. Okay, that gravitational pull was stronger than ever. And I pressed the line, and then she really ghosted me. And it wasn't an overnight thing. It was a gradual ghosting. It was almost like she didn't want to let go, but she knew she had to. That was kind of the sense I got. And you could tell I'm working with a lot of assumptions, even in retrospect, because that's really all she gave me. She gave me one explanation, which was that she wasn't ready for a relationship. And that was pretty much that. It wasn't until about 2 to 3 months ago when I was watching a video with my girlfriend about platonic intimacy, or rather non-romantic intimacy in general, that I finally pieced together what the fuck actually happened. So, in retrospect, I think that whole situation was a big miscommunication. Primarily because of me. Because of, again, my inability to distinguish between my definition of friendship and her definition of friendship. Because something I've noticed, and again, I mentioned earlier that my friend Melissa, that was kind of the only female friend I had, or at least the closest female friend I had growing up, and the only female friend I had in high school. Something I noticed is that women seem to have, and I'm generalizing here, but this is just based on my own anecdotal experience. If your anecdotal experience is different, then comment below how it differs. But I've noticed that the women that I've come across, the boundaries that they set within platonic friendships are not nearly as structured as the boundaries that men tend to set for platonic friendships. So, for example, with the whole touching thing and the getting close and personal and saying, oh, it's been exactly 1 year since we matched, or rather 1 month since we matched on Tinder. Those are things that if one of my male friends were to do, I would feel kind of strange. I would be weirded out by that. And I would probably try to create a little bit of distance between us. And if I had had any sense when I was younger, I probably would have done the same thing to her. Not necessarily out of hostility or anything like that, or out of anger or resentment, more so out of self-respect. You see, I think the biggest mistake I made in that situation, looking back on it, and I'm telling you this because if you're in a similar situation, you need to know this. Now, mind you, I'm okay. In fact, I'm not just okay. I'm happy with how my life has turned out, romantically speaking, because I'm in a beautiful relationship with someone who, fun fact, I actually knew before I even met that girl. In fact, the person I'm in a relationship with right now was actually my second female friend, my second real female friend. And we actually ended up progressing into a relationship because we broke the barrier of talking on the phone. We went from texting to talking on the phone. And within about 2 months of us doing that, we were in a relationship. That was the only thing we had to do. We literally were on 2 different continents. And just from talking on the phone, having those long FaceTime calls, just like with the other girl, again, 2 months later, we were together. We were in a relationship. Because, again, for me as a man, and maybe I shouldn't even put this on all men, but just for me personally, I feel like certain things are going to inevitably create or amplify attraction. For me, quality time, with that being one of my personal love languages, is one of those things. And so, again, her extending those dates, if I had had any sense when I was younger, I would have put a stop to that. I think maybe I was a bit too blinded by my desire to be with her in any capacity to set any boundaries. So in other words, I just lacked self-respect because I was so deeply infatuated with this girl. But I gave her the authority to set her boundaries by saying that she wasn't ready for a relationship and she just wanted to be friends. But I didn't give myself the authority to set my own boundaries by saying, well, that's fine, but if we're going to be friends, this is what friendship looks like to me. Friendship is not you putting your hand on my shoulder. Friendship is not you spending 10 hours in an enclosed space with me and doing other things that I won't even get into in this video. But that's not what friendship looks like to me. And I guess, again, I just thought it was common sense. I thought everyone thought the same way. So I was like, oh, she's trying to show me that she's still into me. But she wasn't. Evidently, she wasn't, because when I made my move, she ghosted me. And also, just another little side note, but for my book Soul Shock that I mentioned earlier, I got a review, this scathing review a few years ago from someone that I think knows her in real life. I don't really know who it is, if it's a family member or a friend or whatever, but if you read the review, if you go to the reviews of that book, I don't even need to tell you which review it is. You'll see it. It's the really, really long-winded one. Just from some of the phrases that they use, I can tell it's somebody who knows her in real life. And something that they said in the review was that we were doing mundane activities that friends do. And that confused me so much when I read it that I literally just discarded the whole comment in my mind. I was like, this review is complete bullshit. This person doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. They weren't there with us. For all I know, it might actually be her. It could be her. I don't know. But it's definitely someone who knows her if it's not her. But now I understand it. I understand why that person said it, because if it's someone who knows her and has a good sense of how she views friendship, especially if it's one of her friends, then I can see why they would perceive the things that she was doing as normal, and they would think I was overreacting. But for my friends, when I told them about the situation, they were on my side. Not just because they're my friends. My friends will tell me if I'm on some bullshit. They were on my side because, again, that's not how our friendships look. I don't spend 10 hours at a time with my friends. These are friends that I've known for years. Some of them since before my balls dropped. And, 4 hours, 5 maximum. Most of my friends, I might text them twice a year at this point, but we're still cool. But with this girl who I had just met less than a month prior, we were hanging out 10 hours at a time. You can see how I was confused. But now I can see how she was confused when I made those romantic advances. I finally get it. And what's the lesson in all of this? The lesson is that platonic intimacy is a real thing. And if you're going to be friends with someone, especially someone that you are even remotely attracted to, You need to have a conversation about what platonic intimacy looks like for both of you. That's a conversation that her and I did not have, and it caused me a great deal of suffering.